The record button. Welcome to the Abstrakt podcast. We are so fortunate today to have Sally from the Bridge Group join us. And Sally, if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Great. Thanks so much, Greg. I'm excited to be here and helping you launch all of this fun stuff. So with the Bridge Group is, hopefully everyone has heard about it, but for those that haven't, we've been around for 22 years helping inside sales and sales development teams produce much better results and do it much more efficiently and effectively. And that's our whole focus and mantra in life. And we do that through consulting, but we also do a lot of support of the industry and the profession by doing lots of research. We are very prolific in the blogosphere on LinkedIn, and just helping to write a lot of really valuable content that is out there to help people get better at this and make this, work much better for them.
Nice. I love that. And so you've been involved in, and I'm just going to apologize to our listeners. We have a couple different things going on in the background. I got a newborn baby who you might hear cry. He's crying right now. And Sally might have some dogs barking. So we'll just add some flavor to our call. So
Absolutely.
you've been in the sales training world for a while now. You've been in sales for a while. And so one of the things that I'm really excited to talk with you about is your experience, what you're seeing in the market, and how it really relates specifically to the role of the SDR. I was fortunate to get into tech sales as an SDR. I think the SDR is probably the most under-recognized member of the revenue team. And I talk about revenue team being sales development, account executives, like sales engineers, customer success. A good SDR is worth their weight in gold. And so
Absolutely.
I really want to make sure we talk about I know the Bridge Group is all about data, like what are you guys seeing in the market, how SDRs are changing, what can organizations be doing to help these SDRs maybe onboard quickly, ramp quickly, and then ultimately how are organizations supporting the SDR org in this what is likely to be a remote selling environment for the foreseeable future. So really excited to dive into those topics today.
Absolutely.
We'll start with the Bridge Group's mantra, holistic,
Yes.
targeted solutions. What does that mean to you personally?
Yeah, I think why this is so important is because the main thing that we're trying to get across is there's not a one-size-fits-all model. There's certainly key components and frameworks that have to be accounted for in every SDR model, but they're not always the same. You can't take the Salesforce model or the Dropbox model or the Box model or whatever the latest hot flavor company of the day is and insert that into your company. And I think that's where we go wrong. We worked at one company and that's what we got to know. And so we tried to put that model and what we did into a new company. And wow, all of a sudden it doesn't work. And, and it's like, surprise. Yeah. I mean, we used to get, I'm dating myself and I have been in this for a long time, but I got my start at Oracle back many, many years ago when Oracle was a $50 million company. And in 4 years, we became a $1 billion company. And
Wow.
when I went out and was doing this, everybody was like, I want the Oracle model. I want the Oracle model. And it's like, but you're a $20 million company. You're not Oracle. You have no brand name recognition. You're not selling to the same buyers and you don't have the same product. And it just doesn't work. And so, and that happens. And that's, some of the differences that you have to account for. And so that's why we use all of our industry research and what we learn from everybody else, but we bring experience from so many different companies at so many different stages. And you have to take all of that into account and identify what's really best for your company, your buyers, based on the stage of the market that you're in and what your goals and objectives are. And then you have to, adjust and make it work in those given situations. And so I think that that's what is so important and what is missing from so many things today.
I love that. We could probably spend all day talking about just because it worked at Salesforce doesn't mean it's going to work for your startup. And
Exactly.
just, an SDR who's prospecting on behalf of a $500,000 seed funded company doesn't have the ability to insert company name in the subject line and for a prospect to automatically recognize who they are. Very,
Exactly.
very, very different. So I love that that's something that you guys start to put focus on with your clients. So piggybacking off of that real quick, if I can go off on a small little tangent, how do you, thinking kind of a top leadership perspective, how do you tell the CEO that who's being told by their board, hey, you need to go hire this person with this resume? Like, how do you tell the CEO to not listen to that advice and not follow that old playbook of the Oracle or the Salesforce? Like, that's got to be a hard conversation to have, right?
Well, fortunately, I actually love to have those conversations. And I
Okay.
may be sometimes a little bit too bold and direct in them.
Okay.
But I think telling these stories and giving examples, here's why it won't work.
Yeah.
Right. And here's why. I mean, and we run across this a lot with CEOs that, especially when they want to hire a VP of sales, typically, or a sales leader, and they go out and they want, they're a small start, again, no brand name recognition. They may be evangelizing in their space and creating a new market. And they're like, we want to go out and hire this VP from Salesforce, right? Or from HP or SAP or Oracle or whatever big name company out there. And it very rarely works.
Hmm.
Right? I mean, just for a multitude of reasons. But so giving those examples and saying, here's some reasons why it doesn't work. They don't know how to do that heavy lifting. They don't know how to create that messaging to explain why they want to talk with you. Because again, like you said, they can pick up the phone or send an email and say, I'm with Salesforce. And if you're a high enough level, they're going to be like, yeah, I want to talk to you. You're from
Yep.
Salesforce and I know exactly what you do and I want to talk to you.
Yep.
Right? You don't have that at these smaller companies. And so, giving those kind of examples and why things don't work like that, and I always like to use at the leadership position, I mean, just even things like that VP has never had to make their airline arrangements for him before and their hotel arrangements, right? And now you put them in this smaller environment and they got to make their own travel arrangements. And they're like,
What do I
I don't know what to
do?
do. I don't know how to do it. And I mean, it's kind of funny, but it's the honest to God truth.
Yeah.
And that's some of the differences, right? That you just have to consider when you're making these kind of major decisions and changes.
Yeah.
And you want somebody who knows how to be agile,
Yeah. Love it.
right? And think on their feet and can, do different things and is willing to roll up their sleeves and get their hands dirty, because you got to get involved in these earlier companies, and really, sometimes getting on the phone and
Yeah.
really understanding what are my SDRs and my sales reps hearing from prospects,
Oh,
right? What
love it.
are the types of questions that they're getting and how can I help them figure out how do we answer that question, right? And how do we address it with prospects? So
Yeah.
even, whether you're in sales, marketing, product marketing, I think one of the biggest things that you can do is get on the phone and listen or understand, take some calls, make some calls, see what these people in the front lines are dealing with. You'll have a whole new appreciation for what the job is, but also for the type of materials and content and messaging that you need to provide these roles to make them successful.
Love it. That is so true. I had a boss early in my sales career who I was convinced that he hadn't ran a sales call in probably 10 years, and he was telling me how to run a sales call, and there was just such a disconnect, and I had no respect for the guy. And I think it ties into one of the questions that I want to talk to you about is kind of, you said somebody who's agile, a personality characteristic. So one of your specialties, looking at your resume and your success, seems to be building sales teams. What are some of the key things you ask your clients to maybe look for or hone in on when they're building a team to help maybe identify the people that are willing to get on the phone with an SDR, that can roll up their sleeves, they're in the trenches every single day? Have you guys nailed down the secret formula for helping your clients figure that out?
Yeah, so again, it's about asking the right questions and not really, looking just because they've been an SDR manager or they've been an SDR before, right? It's the same as just because you've been a VP of something before doesn't mean that you're any good at it, number one. um, and it doesn't mean that you can come in and be successful, right?
Mhm.
So it's really understanding and learning. Well, tell me about how you would get started. What are some of the first things that you would do? And, if they start off by, well, I'm going to look at your tech stack and I want to see if you've got, a sales engagement tool and your data. And while all of those things can be important, those are not the most important things or the things that you really want to hear about, right? You want to hear about them understanding and trying to learn, who your buyers are. What are the buyer challenges that your products solve and your solutions solve? And how are you going to message that? What does the sales team need if you're going to be coming in as an SDR? What does the sales team need? Right? What's their biggest challenge? For some sales teams, it's like, they just need to talk to people. So, that's a different strategy than if your sales team's got some really good pipeline and they're pretty busy, then you need to give them a lot more quality and better meetings,
Yeah,
right? But if they're dying to talk to anybody and everybody, and that's how they're also going to learn what's going on in the market when you're evangelizing, the more people you can talk to, the better. And they may not be even what you think are the right personas, but a lot of times you may not know what the right persona is, right? So the
yeah,
more you talk to people, the more you're going to learn, and that they're willing to get on the phone. I mean, to me, that's the sign. Or if they're going to sit in the back, right, and just do, run reports or, look at tech stacks, that's probably not the right person.
yeah. Okay.
Again, it depends on what stage you're at. I mean, if you already got a well-oiled machine going, then
Yeah,
maybe that's exactly what you need. Somebody that can find those little areas to tweak.
yeah, absolutely. So that's a good point. So we talk about a remote workforce, right? Geography, location of talent is probably never going to be a serious indicator of who you work for moving forward. And so you talk about different size companies. You get to some place that's, $500 million, that dashboard leader, right, knows which levers to pull, what to tweak here and there, is somebody who's important. But for maybe a smaller startup, what you're looking for early days is a leader to get on the phone with your prospects, get their hands dirty. So it really goes back to type of company, size of company, making sure there's alignment there across the entire organization. Is that a fair summary of kind of what you're talking about?
Yeah, I think that's a great recap
Cool.
of what I
Perfect.
was trying to get across. Yep.
Cool. So we got the people hired now. Onboarding. So I've always found that it's much easier to train my account executives to run live video conference demos than it is to train my SDRs. Um, SDRs are making maybe 100 phone calls a day or 50
Mm-hmm.
if we're going over quantity over quality. I, I have an SDR team right now of 3 at my current role, and I'm struggling to onboard them and kind of in a repeatable fashion. I can't imagine doing it across an entire company. What are you seeing in the market? What changes have taken place where you're seeing, hey, these companies are doing this really well, And
Mhm.
hey, here's what not to do when you're thinking about 100% remote SDR team.
Yeah, I think it's really hard, whether it's an SDR team, a sales team, bringing on an executive, bringing on somebody in marketing today. Over the last 4 months, talking to people, I've talked to a lot of new, whether they're VPs of marketing or VPs of sales, um, that are new to the company since COVID. And so they haven't met in person anybody from the company. And while they are on Zoom meetings all day long with them, they haven't been able to forge that actual relationship, and they feel extremely disconnected. They're
Mhm.
not getting what the culture of the company is like, right? So there's some real challenges in doing it remotely. I think field sales has always been remote, right? But
Yep.
they're usually brought in the beginning to corporate, right? And they'll spend a week or two or whatever it is going through their boot camp and their training
Yep.
and the onboarding. And so you're able to develop that relationship and that rapport and understand the culture of the company and your boss throughout that. We
Mhm.
can't even do that for a week or two right now. So it's a really tough situation. So I think the more that the direct managers are aware this is really tough, the more that you build some type of bonding with the team and the new people. Um, One of the best SDR directors that I know has really taken it to the next level through this. She's got a younger and experienced to business team, and they are really having a hard time being so disconnected. I mean, they were all in an office before, now they're not. They're having a hard time in their home environment where they're working because they're not living at home, and now there's four people that they probably didn't know before, all working from home in San Francisco. It's probably 800, if you're lucky, square foot apartment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, yeah, and so you don't have any of that social interaction. You don't have that connection. So every week she's doing something different. She's done remote karaoke with the team,
That's awesome.
remote poker nights. And so just helping to build that
Okay.
and forge that connection is really key and critical. I mean, because not to go down a dark path, but there are some of these teams. I have another friend that the week before she started, there was a suicide on her team.
Oh
And then
no.
after she started, there was an attempted suicide. So, I mean, this is a real severe and real problem that people need to really think about, whether it's for existing teams or onboarding. But I also think for onboarding, if we're talking about SDRs in particular, all of our onboarding programs are really geared towards sales.
Mhm.
They're not geared towards SDRs.
Yep.
And I hear a lot. Well, we hire really smart people. They can figure out who the buyer personas are they're supposed to go after, the companies they're supposed to go after, and the message and what value we provide. Well, you know what? We are hiring really smart people. However, if they've never been shown what good looks like and how to do this right, they're not doing it right. I mean, the thing that we're called in for the last 5 years, actually, the most on is how do we make outbound prospecting work? Because just allowing these people to do it on their own and think that they can figure out what the right messaging is that's going to resonate with a buyer. And oh, by the way, you're calling on maybe a chief security officer or chief information security officer. If they're right out of college, they may not have even know what that position is or that
Yeah.
position existed. So how are they going to deliver a message that's
That
going to be important to these people, that's going to make them say, yes, I need to talk to this person and find out more.
So it's such a good point. So you think about when companies build forecasts, they have maybe, I don't know, let's throw a number out there, 30% of their projected forecast to come from outbound prospecting, right? They kind of budget marketing dollars around a certain amount coming from these activities, why would you not invest 30% of your training resources around making sure that those SDRs have what they need? And yes, they may be the smartest people in the world, but again, if there's not a benchmark to kind of show them what they need to strive
Right,
towards,
right.
then you're setting them up for failure, and the only person you have to blame is yourself. Um,
Exactly. And I think that's the biggest downfall is that we don't set SDRs up for success. We assume that through osmosis, because now they have an SDR title that we just hired, they're going to know all this stuff.
yeah,
And, I know a lot of executives think that the SDR role is pretty easy, and it's not. It's the toughest job probably in the company, but
yeah,
definitely in the sales world. And until they've actually gone on the phone and done it and have to do it, at the volumes every day in and day out, I'm sure that those sales leaders would take back that statement. And so you really do need to give them the right tools. And when I say tools, I don't necessarily just mean technology,
yeah,
but, who are they going after? Who's the right ideal customer profile? Who are the right buyers? What's important to those buyers? What problems are they trying to solve? And what's our business value? You don't need to know the details around the product. So I'm going to go off on a tangent here.
go for it,
We have
go
a
for it.
we have a lot of different, in tech where we think you have to have previous experience in security, for instance. Security is a big one. They won't hire anybody unless you have previous experience in security. Why? I mean, if you set the people up for success, and these people, oh, by the way, got started in security at some point in time without knowing security,
Yeah,
and
right,
were able to make it successful.
right,
So that's not the most important thing, right? You
yeah,
can teach somebody about security and what they need to know about your space. It's much harder to teach them because we don't teach them,
yeah, right, yes,
how to do the SDR role right. What is the proper messaging? How do you reach out to these people to make them want to say, yes, again, I want to talk to you? That's much harder because very few companies are doing it.
yeah. We could probably go off on hours worth of, you have to have security experience to come work here. And it's so funny, some of the best people I've ever hired, Sally, they came from different markets. And what I realized
Exactly.
is they didn't come with what I called bad habits. They didn't come with a certain expectation of how things needed to be done. So I was always like, oh, you come from something completely different and unique than what I'm
Hmm.
normally looking for. Let me talk to you. Why are you interested in coming to work here? And
Exactly. I
so,
totally agree, Greg. And one of the things that, the person I was talking about who's a dynamite SDR director who's doing all this great stuff, getting people to feel connected. And she was actually, I hired her back 10 years ago, and she came from the financial services. She was a stockbroker,
wow.
and she's worked her way up, didn't know a thing about tech, and has been dynamite. Some of the other people that I've hired in my past, one was an accountant who
Okay.
was dynamite and
Wow.
has become a VP of sales the rest of his career. Another one was a wine salesman.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I mean, it's just got to open
Yeah.
up.
Well, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, that brings me to the next topic around onboarding these people. So you have your SDR candidates, you've kind of identified the right fit for the leader, um, onboarding SDRs. So
Hmm.
I've always felt that there's knowing that a certain amount of my number always is attributed to SDR performance. It's like an added stress, right? You got your AEs, you know their quota. SDRs bring a certain level of stress associated with that because they have to generate X number of dollars in pipeline. Um, Add in current world events. What would be your advice to your clients out there, our listeners around how do we how do we really try to control our controllables and make sure that we don't impose stress upon ourselves that we don't need to have when we're onboarding, maybe 10 SDRs at once in a completely remote environment?
It's awesome if you can onboard more at one time. The onboarding, again, no matter what role, but if you onboard one at a time, it's a lot harder.
Mhm.
Mostly because I think we decide it's just one person, so we don't dedicate enough time and attention to the actual
Mhm.
onboarding to make it good.
Okay.
So when you usually have 10 people onboarding at once or 5, it's like, oh, we got to be on our game. We got to do this. So, onboarding for SDRs, I mean, we go through and we provide a whole lot of services for helping you figure out your onboarding. There's a lot that is the same as the sales team, but then we need to get different. And, creating a playbook for SDRs that is unique to SDRs is so important. A lot of companies have invested a lot of money in sales methodologies, sales approaches, whether it's medic or complex selling or targeted account selling
Spin
or Miller
selling,
Hyman,
whatever.
Spin, Sandler. They've invested a lot in those, which are awesome programs, and then they train the SDRs on them. But the problem is that those programs start when the SDRs are finished. Right?
Uh,
So they start when they're assuming we already have somebody on the line that is interested, and I'm having that first discovery call.
uh-huh.
They don't talk about, well, how do you get it to a discovery call where the SDRs play,
Yeah.
right? So you have to bring it down in the messaging to the SDR level, right? Of how do you even get started and what's your approach? And so training SDRs and salespeople need to be trained on this too. But on, again, not just who you are as a company and all the great awards you've won and that you're in the, magic quadrant by
Yeah.
Gartner or whatever, but you got to get down to, again, your buyer's side of things. So training them on who are the companies, what do the companies look like, where have we had success, who are our buyers, what are those roles? Again, getting to that buyer persona that's specific about these buyers have these challenges.
Mhm.
And then here's how we help solve those business challenges. Again, not feature and function. It's not about product, but
Yeah.
it's about solving business challenges. So what is that? And don't make the SDRs do any translation. The challenges we sometimes see is marketing has a lot of good information, but it's like 15 pages of buyer persona information, right?
No one's gonna read all that.
Right. And then the SDRs have to figure out what's important. What can I say to that actual buyer? Or do I need to do a translation into buyer speak? And so, doing that translation and, giving the SDRs exactly what they can say in an email, put in an email. What can they say in a voicemail? What can they say in a conversation? Don't have them have to try to figure it out,
Mhm.
especially when they're brand new,
Yeah.
on how to do the translation and what that translation is. Um, so giving them all of that information, what's their cadence or sequence, right? How many times are they supposed to reach out? Is it supposed to be voicemail, email, phone?
Set those
And
guardrails.
yeah, set it all up for them. Give them the keys to the kingdom to be successful. Don't make them figure it out on their own.
It's already hard
There's,
enough.
yeah, and there's a lot of ways that you can use the brain power from these smart people we're hiring.
Mhm.
And most of that's going to come in when they're actually on a phone call and they're having a conversation. We need them to be able to think on their feet and how to guide that conversation, get out of it what they need, and set that meeting. That's where we need the brain power,
Yeah. And
right?
so when you talk about frameworks or playbooks, that's what you're talking about is kind of helping them
Yeah.
understand how to go through their cadences, what a good email looks like, what a good email does or a bad email looks like, high level Cliff Notes version of our personas, or one of my
Yes, a
favorite
one
things.
pager.
Yeah, right. Or how to research somebody. Like, how do you go
Yes.
find information about Sally? How do you go find information about Kevin, right? And then how do you use that information to
Yes.
engage with your prospect? So
Oh, that's a big one, Greg, and a big sinkhole we find SDRs is because they just know that they're supposed to research because everywhere you look on, LinkedIn sphere, you've got to research, do
yeah.
all this. But we don't tell them, well, what is it that you're researching? What are you looking for? Where do you find it? And then if you find it, how do you use it? Right? So it's just research. And we find many SDRs. I mean, this is common when we go into an organization. SDRs are spending 30 minutes researching before they make a phone call. But again, they don't even know what they're looking for, but they're researching and they don't know how to take that information and create an email or customize or personalize anything. And then 3 days later, when they need to make their next outreach, they're doing the same outreach. So
Mhm.
it's so inefficient and ineffective,
Yeah.
but we got to give them the guidelines. I mean, again, people need, there is a method to the madness that if you've never done it before, you've never done it successfully before. Well, no, again,
Yeah.
it's showing them what good looks like,
Yeah, absolutely. I love
right?
that. I love that. So it's like my old soccer coach, do better. Well, what is better? I don't know what that means. So uh
Exactly.
like
Exactly. I saw that exact thing where, this was about a year ago, but everything was, make it relevant, make your message relevant, right?
mm,
And finally, somebody was like, what does that mean?
yeah,
How do I know how to make my message relevant? What am I doing to make it relevant?
yeah.
It's like, bingo. We got
That's
to quit using these buzzwords, right?
yep, absolutely. So that's a nice tie-in. So I'm an SDR, or let's say I'm an accountant, Sally, and I want to get into the world of tech sales. And I know
Mhm.
SDR is the world I want to go. What what advice would you have to me when trying to find companies that will help me be successful? Like, how do I interview my prospective employer to understand whether or not they have these things in place, knowing that I have 3 roommates that are doing the same thing, that I have a dog in the background, that I'm going to
Mhm.
be mostly isolated, at least geographically, from my entire company for the foreseeable future. Like, how do I what advice do you have for me trying to find that good home for my future sales career?
Yeah, I think it's some skills that a good SDR always has, and it's asking a lot of questions, right? And so the interview process is one that you're not just sitting there waiting for the company to ask you questions,
Hmm.
but you need to be asking these questions that are important to you,
Yeah,
right? So if getting proper training so you can be successful is really important to you as an SDR, which I hope it is,
it should be.
it better be. Asking everybody that you talk to, don't just get one person's perspective, but get everybody's perspective. So, what's the onboarding? How am I going to get set up for success? What materials are there? What's the training look like? What does it cover that is specific to the SDR role? Not just, oh, we're going to tell you all about the company and, our products, and we're going to give you HR guidelines and how to get paid. I mean, that's all important stuff, but that's not going to help you be successful in your role. So, ask all of those questions. Ask the qualifying questions. Wow, that sounds awesome. I love you're going to tell me how I'm going to get paid and you're going to tell me about the product and stuff. But what are you going to teach me about my specific role at this company? Even if you've been an SDR before, you're going to bring some stuff with you,
Yeah,
hopefully will help you. But again, as we talked about right in the beginning, every company is different.
yeah, absolutely.
And so you need to understand what they're going to provide you that's really specific to this company in your role, not
I
just
like
the generic stuff.
I like it, and couple comments on that. I think the best SDRs I've ever hired, Sally, have always interviewed me more than I
Yes.
interviewed them. And so I found that there was a direct correlation between that, and it was almost like they had this like intrinsic curiosity that drove them
Yes.
to want to understand, which
Yes.
is so key as an SDR. You
It's
have to be
very key.
curious.
Yes. And that, I mean, just asking somebody if they're curious, I mean, because I'm not sure that people know how to understand and figure out, do they have that natural curiosity?
Yeah,
If they're not asking you any questions, they don't have
correct.
it. Right? I mean, other than, well, when are you hiring? Other than some really basic ones, but if they're delving in and they, after they ask that first question and you give an answer, if they don't ask a follow-up question
Yep,
and that deeper dive question, they don't know.
exactly. They're not going to do it when they're talking to a prospect if they're not doing it
Right.
in the interview process. Abs-
Exactly.
Is it fair for a candidate to ask about culture? Do you guys do
Absolutely.
poker nights? Are we doing karaoke? Like, what are you doing to keep the team connected?
And I would ask that exact question. Maybe it's not karaoke or poker or whatever, but, just say, I know that this is really, some trying times
Mhm.
for a lot, and especially starting where I'm not going to be able to meet the team. What's the culture there? How are you keeping the team connected and engaged? Just even whether it's fun stuff or it's things like, I mean, one of the best reasons for having these SDR and inside sales teams in the office together is the learning and the sharing,
Yep.
right? That you can overhear that phone call. Oh my God, I love how they position that. I'm going to try it next time, right?
Yeah.
Whether, and so you're not getting that at home at all. So how are we sharing best practices? How are we talking about what's working, what's not working? Even if it's, is your manager doing coaching? How are they doing coaching? How often do they do coaching? Right? To help, because some of that will come out during coaching. It'll come out during group. You can still do, this may be very old school, but I always held weekly lunch and learns. And whether it was bringing in bagels in the morning and we did it around coffee and bagels, or we brought in pizza or sandwiches or, Chinese food or tacos or whatever
Yeah.
around lunch, bring in marketing, product marketing, right? Sharing. You can still do that. I can send a gift card. I can do, Sendoso or whatever and send things to my team. And we can still have these Zoom sessions
Yeah.
and do them remotely. But are they doing them? Because
Yeah.
it takes a little bit more, takes a, few minutes, you got to be a little bit more organized to do it today.
Yeah. And I think one of the coolest things I ever saw one of my colleagues do was actually a workshop Wednesday where each week a different member of the team actually presented on a topic they had become the expert in.
Love it.
And so it wasn't even the manager who needed to come every week with material prepared. He would ask his team, hey, what's a topic that's really interesting to you? Okay, you're going to present next Wednesday on this topic. What do you want the
Awesome.
team to walk away
Yep.
with? And so as a sales leader, maybe trying to keep a SDR team engaged, maybe don't feel like you have to do it all yourself.
Right.
Maybe let your team kind of let them and their interests kind of start to surface, and let them be the leader on a specific topic, so the team kind of goes to them for some things as opposed to you for everything, which
That's great.
creates
And
a
I
lot
love
of
that yeah, and you're showcasing, you're allowing these people to, show how much they know, how good
yeah
they are, what they've done that's good. And
yep
I think that really helps build up the individuals in the team as well.
yeah
And so, it can even be, hey, I want you to bring, or if you even know because you're listening to your recorded calls, that was an excellent call. We're going to showcase that in a team meeting, and we're
mhm,
going to talk about it. And I want you to guide the discussion as to why you did certain things, why you went down this path and not this path, and let them shine,
yeah I love it.
right? And give them that pat on the back and
I love it.
say, this was awesome.
Yeah. Well, let's final question here, and we'll let you get back to your rest of your day. So I always like to ask uh, individuals that have been sharing their words of advice, kind of maybe the top three things that have really that they've learned that have changed their career. The goal here being our listeners can take those things and see if those types of ideas make sense for them. So, Sally, over 20 years of sales experience, what have been the three things that you have found made the biggest impact on your career?
So, and I hate to be kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? You know, cliche about it, but being that I've been in sales my whole career and SDRs, I mean, there's a couple of things. One is just that tenacity and persistence.
Yep.
Don't give up after one or two, whether you're an SDR or you're in sales.
Yeah.
If you give up way too soon, you're going to fail. And I was just talking to a group of SDR leaders right before this, and they were transitioning to outbound prospecting, and so I was like, the messaging is so different, and it is, and so this is my second point too about the messaging that we've
Okay.
already talked about, but
Yeah.
I had been introduced to this guy, this VP in charge of SDRs, by a VP of sales at his company. And I couldn't get the guy to respond. So I started my, I know what your challenges are kind of approach, and
Hmm.
here's how we can help you, right? Here's the value that we bring. And so after the sixth attempt of reaching out to this guy, it was about outbound prospecting. It's like, this is the biggest thing companies struggle with. Here's why. Here's some things you may want to consider. He responded within an hour.
Love it.
So again, that's a combo one of being, don't give up too soon.
Yep.
There's a point in time when you need to give up.
Yeah.
But you don't give up too soon. And you, again, making the message, to what their needs are, their concerns. It wasn't about me, and that the Bridge Group wrote this great book, and that we've been nominated as the top women in sales and SDR. It wasn't about any of that kind of stuff. Nobody
Yeah.
cares about that,
No one
right?
does. I love that. I love that you just
Right.
said
So
that.
yeah, it's about what my prospect was dealing with, and how I can help them and make
Yep.
their life better and make them more successful.
Love it. That is so true. No one cares about what you did for company XYZ 3 years ago. They care about their problems and how you're going to help their problems today.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
I love
Yeah.
that.
So those are the two. And the third one, again, I think it's you're always proving yourself.
Oh,
Which is good and bad, but you can never rest on your laurels.
no.
Again, whether it's an SDR or in sales, and it's like, and I used to tell my teams all the time, it's not about what you did a month ago, a quarter ago, maybe even yesterday. It's about
Yep.
what are you doing today,
Yep.
right? So you got to get used to that.
Absolutely. It's something that you have to wrap your head around so early in your sales career. Because if you ever like mutter like, well, I hit my number last quarter, like no one cares, and you have to be okay with that.
Yes.
So I love it.
Yes.
Well, that is I would say blunt and honest advice, and I appreciate it. I agree with all three of your points. And again, thank you so much for sharing your time with us today. Really great insight. And if you haven't read the Sales Development Playbook, please pick it up. I have found a lot of success personally in using that book. And if anybody has any questions or would like to learn more about the Bridge Group, please don't hesitate to reach out to them.
Thank you so much, Greg. It was awesome.
Cool. Have a good day.
Thanks.